Welcome everyone to our discussion on sustainable innovation, namely which sustainable innovations will help drive industry through a time of uncertainty and crisis. And I think we can all agree that this really has been a time of unprecedented uncertainty and crisis. We have seen global supply chains upended. We have seen businesses forced to undergo really difficult transitions, essentially on a dime, and find a path towards a more robust and resilient future. And the factor that's underpinning all of this is sustainable innovation. And that is precisely what we want to discuss today. And I have four excellent speakers who are joining us, who are experts precisely on this topic. I'm going to introduce them now. We have Katharina Hölzle with us. She's a professor of IT-Entrepreneurship at the Hasso-Plattner-Institut. We have Dr. Philipp Rösler with us. He is the CEO and founder of the consulting company Consessor AG, and he's a former federal minister of economics here in Germany as well. Sabine Scheunert is the vice president of digital and IT sales marketing at Mercedes-Benz cars. And we have Dominic Kurtaz with us. He's the managing director of EuroCentral at Dassault Systems. Welcome to all of you. Very happy to have you with us. And Katharina, I'd like to start with you because, you know, innovation is a term that we bandy about often without necessarily knowing what we're discussing. And you recently wrote an article, I'm going to quote you here, where you said, innovation doesn't just mean developing a new product or service. It means a completely new way of thinking to solve major societal challenges. So I'm putting you on the spot here, but what did you mean by that?
That we need the skills and the abilities to think differently in order to first understand where the big challenges are. And we all know that we're talking about the grand challenges these days. And actually the very first step for every innovation is to understand what really the problem is. So this shift in thinking, the shift in mindset, how I call it, gives us a new perspective of understanding what the problem is, then thinking in a quick, iterative, user-centric way to develop ideas to solve that problem, and then put these ideas into practice, again, very quickly, not afraid to fail, just trying out things, learning from those failures, and then going into kind of put them in practice. And along that way, not doing this obviously all by yourself, but rather involving tons of different stakeholders, be it researchers, be it companies, be it the society at large, be it politics. So this, in a nutshell, for me, is this perspective changing for the sustainable innovation, for becoming more resilient, what we need these days and the days to come.
Okay, so it sounds simple, but the devil really is in the detail there. Dominic, following up on what we heard Katharina say there, how can new technologies help in that process?
That's a really good question to ask. I heard three things already mentioned about supply chains, speed, and also ecosystems. And maybe just on the concept of speed, and particularly in the pandemic, we speak of the challenges, but I also think it's opened up as many opportunities. And we're working with one of Europe's most prestigious consumer goods manufacturers, and it was very much a business-to-business model prior to the pandemic. But they've quickly had to go to an online sales model. And now nearly 40% of their revenue is coming from that new channel. It's a completely new business model. And overnight, they had to figure out how to bring virtual products through new supply chains, new sales channels, of course, reach new audience. So we should also focus on the opportunity as well. I think from a supply chain perspective, I mean, it's all over the news right now in terms of silicon disruption. And I think the days of companies taking months to onboard and collaborate with suppliers is gone. We now need to do that in a matter of days, if not hours in some industries. And I think cloud technologies are a real enabler to allow us to drive that speed and different flow of capacity. And I think the final one around ecosystems that was mentioned is, the flow of innovation no longer comes from those vertical supply chains. For an example, if I'm an automotive manufacturer, I don't just look into my classical supply chain for innovation. I'm actually looking at different companies in different industries in terms of where I can power that. So the scale and flexibility that we need to build sustainable ecosystems is absolutely, I think, a key imperative for every business nowadays.
Okay, let's go from that bird's eye view to maybe more specific examples. And Philipp, coming to you now, you yourself are a founder and entrepreneur. So what, within that infrastructure, that ecosystem, what are the hurdles and the challenges that you face?
I think we just heard it. So first, there's still a different ecosystem. So there's not a natural flow between universities, science organizations, but also smaller and mid-sized enterprises and the bigger industry conglomerates first. Second, and that's even more important, we have the problem of still a mindset, right? So it's a little bit more in Europe and Germany, so that everything which is not explicit allowed is seen automatically as forbidden. Whereas in many other countries, they said, look, as long as it's not forbidden, so we can do it, so it's allowed. And I think that will unleash, even this kind of shift in the mindset will unleash really a lot of creative potential and entrepreneurship. And that's what is still a bit missing. But it's not that difficult to bring this up, because if you compare the entrepreneurs and the innovators in different regions across the world, I would say the guys in Europe, Germany, they're as creative, as dynamic as all the other entrepreneurs. And so there's no obvious reason not to be as successful in bringing up some innovations. So in this respect, I'm optimistic. Maybe we should unleash them even by giving them a bit more freedom in mindset, but also, classical ways of cutting down red tape and other things. But I think the mindset is in this question quite critical.
Sabine, I'm curious if you face that as well at Daimler, this question of mindset being somewhat of a challenge to creative thinkers here in Germany and really also across Europe. Is that something that you find to be a hurdle in innovation at Daimler?
Well, I would rather agree to what Philipp just said. It's a question of mindset, and this kind of mindset shift. I mean, I think the car industry was really somehow forced to think differently. I hope that you agree with that. I mean, our biggest challenge currently is certainly the decarbonization, in terms of making a huge investment with regards to R&D, but also in shifting the consumer demands into a fully electric world. And you can imagine that this only worked by completely transforming not only the company, but also our processes in terms of how we are digitizing, but also in how we are shifting that the consumers are going towards the complete electric combustion engines. Just to give you an example, I mean, and this is not only a German topic, this Reichweiten anxiety. So how far can I go, and do I still have the same mobility concept? I mean, we are really, we were insisting in bringing up new formats. We launched the EQ Ready. Our EQ branding stands for fully electric in terms of trying to tackle those customer current pain points in terms of, am I already ready in doing that shift? Yeah, and we were giving that perspective to them that this is possible, but we still see that there is a lot of anxiety in terms of shifting towards a radical change.
It's a pretty challenging environment you've described there, Sabine. Katharina, coming back to you now, what do you think are the requirements needed to create ecosystems where, in this current environment, new innovators can thrive, also in a more resilient and sustainable way?
That's a short question, which probably requires a very long answer. I'm trying to put the focus on some of the key points. So building ecosystems, obviously, you need different players. You need the companies, you need the entrepreneurs, you need the researchers, you need the politics involved, you need society involved. And what we see is with these grand challenges, it's not enough to have one or two of these players on the table, because very quickly they realize, whoa, there's a lot more to it. And the challenge really is, how do you get all those people together to work on a particular topic? So ecosystem building, for me, requires to first get people motivated to really get together. And, you know, by doing that, obviously, we always talk about, oh, let's build an ecosystem. That's like an oxymoron per se, because an ecosystem, just from a definition, is something that builds itself. And if we look at biology, ecosystems are very resilient, and that's what we aim for. And it's really, we still struggle to understand how ecosystems actually evolve and how they grow. So depending on what kind of ecosystem you want to build, you have to understand what are actually the underlying logics, and then tackle those logics, saying, okay, if I want to build a digital health ecosystem in a particular region, what are kind of the strengths I can approach in this ecosystem, in this area already, and then get those on the table. So that, you know, just trying to be a little more comprehensive, at the same time a little more particular.
That's a really good point. And Dominic, I saw you nodding during that answer there. Is that something that you agree with?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think the points are valid, and it comes down to the mindset that we've spoken about, and it really comes around to connecting people. And I fully agree with the comments on ecosystem. I mean, ecosystems can be structured, but largely they're unstructured and ad hoc and evolve organically. And we need to be able to respond very quickly.
Philipp, perhaps coming to you now as someone who knows various markets really well, not only the German market, do you think that there has been a change away from this status quo into one where we see more openness towards innovation and the ability to make these systems more resilient?
Well, it depends. So in more vibrant and dynamic economies, you see a little bit more. That's the reason why they are more dynamic and maybe vibrant and even successful. In others, maybe some older economies, it's still a back and forth. What I wanted to say is, here again, it's a question of mindset and even politics, right? Quite often you see that technology economy would see on one side, whereas sustainability and protect the environment would be seen on the other side, which is totally nonsense, right? Both has worked together, and only then it's possible to solve any problems. And very concrete, and since we have here mobility in our panel, so I think if there's a problem like CO2 emission based on usage of technologies such as automobile or planes, whatever, it's too simple to forbid the technology in hoping that this will stop the CO2 problem in the world. There's only one way out. And this way is to find better technologies, to have innovations in order to minimize the negative impact of usage of technology. This is the only way. And if this is once clear, then that means also a legal framework that policies have to focus on finding better technologies rather than forbidding some and try to maneuver or govern any innovations. A politician is a politician, and they cannot, and I have some experience, bring up economic innovations that good. I think everyone should know what his role is to play, or her role to play. And politics should focus on good policy framework. Smart regulation means not too much, and give some space, some freedom for the entrepreneurs, for the economy to find some good solutions, ideas that are successful on the market.
Well, we certainly have heard from politics this year already, this month, where economy and ecology going hand in hand. That's something that we've heard in particular on the campaign trail heading towards elections here in Germany. But Sabine, listening to what Philipp just said, what are the next steps then for Daimler in its digital transformation?
Yeah, so like I just mentioned, in the concept of transformation, I mean, we have, I would say, now entered a phase where we are not only radically digitizing our products, yeah, we are decarbonization now is going on, but we are really looking into the entire processes and also into our business models. So as you know, I mean, the Daimler company, we are not a startup company, as Philipp is currently managing it. It's a rather a brownfield, and here certainly we really have to renovate back-end systems. It's a lot about checking out the legacy and really really speeding up and making that kind of big move towards an innovative, also tech-driven, data-driven future. And this goes really hand in hand with a full digital transformation plan. You cannot plan everything. It's not only about running after that plan. I think you really always have to put the customer first. I mean, we are a customer-oriented company since many, many years, and we are also checking relevant steps with regard to the big transformations. Either we talk about the business model, or we talk really about completely, radically simplifying the way of how we are doing the processes internally. And just to give you probably a good example, I mean, everyone knows it, checking in for an after-sales appointment was always a kind of a hassle. You had to call up the dealers. They didn't have time and you had time. And we are shifting towards a completely new model 24/7 in terms of an online appointment booking system. We are entering directly into the dealer management system, which is always not easy. That different applications coming from different suppliers are talking to each other in a good quality. But only to give you a view on that, 20% of all our online appointment bookings around the globe are already done today digitally. And this only gives you a little glimpse of what we have done in one little field. And you can imagine we have thousands of that. But what I wanted to underline is that it's not about shifting little by little, it's about doing things completely different to what we had been used 30, 40 years.
Yeah, a complete digital transformation. And Dominic, I'd love to get your opinion on this, because you also see your company as a real catalyst when it comes to empowering other companies in their Industry 4.0 processes. So can you tell us how that works?
Yeah, I think Sabine has really hit the nail on the head there. It's not just about capturing what we have today, but trying to imagine the future. And the Dassault systems, I won't give you a sales pitch, but there's about 20,000 what we call Imagineers around the world looking at manufacturing, life science and infrastructure. And we use virtual thinking and technologies and softwares to imagine the products and the processes and the business models, as Sabine has just mentioned, that might exist in the future. And we call that a virtual twin. And in fact, we believe that the virtual world can actually extend and improve the real world. Why so? I think it comes back to one of the mindset elements that we discussed earlier. And perhaps in Europe, we're a little bit more risk adverse as in our thinking compared to some of the other continents. But what better way to disrupt that thinking than to do everything virtually? So imagining the kind of customer experiences of the future and then working back in a purely virtual environment through logistics and sales and marketing and manufacturing and engineering, and that first ideation to really break the silos and test those models in a virtual environment where, of course, the environmental handprint and footprint is virtually zero.
And these are all processes. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Sorry, if I just may jump in, because I love that picture you just draw. And I think this is one of the major things we need to work on, that we all become those Imagineers, those foresighters of the future. Because if we see what the pandemic did to us, and if I mean, the five of us in this call, we probably kind of have a little bit of an understanding of that this will not be the last. And we would need exactly that kind of thinking. And unfortunately, if I look at my students, at young and old people, they are scared of the future, right? Because they don't have that imagination, because they've never been trained in that. So for them, it's like, tell me what the future will be like. I'm like, I don't know. And they even get mad about this, because, right, it's like this dealing with uncertainty. So that is like a key point.
If I can just respond to that very quickly, I think there's a really good and topical example of that. If we'd have had the best brains in the world looking at the time it takes to bring new drugs and vaccines and medicines to the marketplace, they would have probably said, you know, we can take 1, maybe 2 months out of that process. The pandemic has actually shown that we can take years out of that process when we put disruptive thinking to it. And maybe just a small plug for Dassault Systems, but more than 60% of the clinical trials for the COVID vaccines that we're deploying today were virtualized through our platform. So it's a good, real example of where disrupting thinking can deliver something that we would never have imagined even 24 months ago.
Philipp, maybe we can come back to you and look at this through the lens of startups, because you work obviously with startups and, as we said, are an entrepreneur yourself. What is it that startups need to be able to emerge from this crisis stronger?
So when I was once minister, I started a trip to the Silicon Valley. I think it's still existing, so creating a bridge between Berlin, but also Munich, Hamburg, and other industry hubs, and it's called German Silicon Valley Accelerator. That was the idea twofold. First, to bring in some new ideas, some networks out of the Silicon Valley, in this very case, to Europe, to Germany, to Berlin. And the other way around, to demonstrate, again, what I just said, that we have also creative people and entrepreneurs around. And what they are asking is, not that much. First, they don't want to have too much regulation. If you ask as a politician what you would like to do for them, they said, look, better we can do our business and you can do your business, then it's not that bad. We will bring up some innovations. But if you really ask for help, then help us to find skilled workforce. Make it easier to bring in nice, smart people from different regions of Europe or even outside Europe. It's super bureaucratic. And imagine 2 or 3 people start up out of the university. They have no clue about human resources and how to bring the people in, to onboard them and other things. Make it a bit easier to bring in some fresh money, some venture capital. The vast majority of all the venture capital across the world is still going to the US and here to the Bay Area. Create a legal framework which makes it easier and faster to come to Germany, to come to Europe. And finally, again, so give us the time to start maybe 2 or 3 years, and then you can up with your annoying bureaucratic stuff. So this is what they're asking for, and we should listen to them, because it's not only the next generation of entrepreneurs. No, our classical industries, the brownfields Sabine just mentioned, they will need these guys, these entrepreneurs, to buy them in, to buy their ideas, to integrate them into their huge industry conglomerate, because that's the idea of Industry 4.0. To have the classical industry on the one hand, and to bring into all the different sectors and industries the digitalization. And for this digitalization, we need quite often digital startups. We have many other startups, but this is the main idea behind, even behind the idea of Industry 4.0.
Sabine, because Philipp just referred to you and to Daimler, the work that you're doing, do you agree? Do you concur with this statement? That
I have been nodding all the time. Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And it's also exactly what we tried to do here, not only in Stuttgart, really across all the locations where we're operating. And it's not that, and we also very, very strongly believe in diversity, in bringing in people with different experiences in terms of capitalizing from these experiences. And you are generating, I would say, by having people from the startups, from the company who have been working since 30 years within Daimler, you are creating, I would say, a new, very dynamic format where I would probably just add one topic that Philipp did not mention, is you need a culture of trust. In terms of that these people mixed in diversity, they believe then towards that, what we said before in that tomorrow's vision. And it's not the tomorrow's, it's the long term, it's the digital target picture. What also Dominic said is, how do we think in 2025, in 2030, we have to run? What kind of processes do we need? Can we completely disrupt our own current processes in terms of becoming better? And I mean, this you can only achieve by, I would say, 2 topics: diversity, what Philipp mentioned, but also by a specific culture of trust, where people carefully listen to each other, and then you think and you act feelers in terms of really opting towards the best innovation and also the own disruption of the best of today.
Katharina, since you're a professor of entrepreneurship, how do you build that culture of trust?
By letting first people see that they have the skills to thrive, because by knowing that I can do it myself, I trust myself first. If I can trust myself and I know that I'm good at something, then I'm open to the others, to trust them. If I'm not trusting myself, and that if I'm, what I just mentioned, if I'm scared of the future, it's really hard to build that nature of trust, because then I feel that everyone is an enemy, because they might take my job, they might take my position, they might take my idea. So let's show people that they can do it. For me as a professor, I'm a teacher, so I try to let my students experience that they can build those skills, that they can trust in those skills, that they fail. Yes, they do, but it's okay, because I help them, if they want, to stand up again. And if we build this not only in schools, at universities, at companies, at society, that people trust themselves, they will trust the others, and they will be open to the others, and they will be open to this radical thinking, because they know that even if it goes really wrong, they still have the base, their base, they can come back to.
That's a nice
Katharina, I would just like to add one topic, because I had the chance to see Amy Edmondson at Harvard Business School, and she teaches about psychological safety. If you haven't read it, it's a fantastic book in terms of exactly what you said. You have to know yourself. You have to trust somehow in yourself with all the experience, whether this is only after 5 years of studies or 20 years in work, or as Philipp, a politician, and now as an entrepreneur. And I mean, if you're listening, if you are somehow, you act fearless towards a better future, I think as a community, as a society, we can reach fundamental better tomorrows. And this is, I think, also what Dominic said. I mean, we showed it in the current pandemic situation because we were forced to it. And I hope that we can take that also without a pandemic situation, hopefully for us all into the future.
I also believe that unlocking our potential is also about the empowerment. And I guess from a technology perspective, this is where we really have a role to play. Because if I have if I just go back a generation, I was constrained by access to capital and even my geographic location. Now, if I have a good idea, I can go to Dassault Systems website tonight, download an application, capture that, access a manufacturing ecosystem globally for things like 3D printing, and a logistics system through the big players that we know. So I can really use technology as an empowerment mechanism to build on what's already been said.
Well, we are running out of time, so I'm just going to ask one quick last question and go around and ask all of you to answer really quickly, one sentence max if possible. If you have a wish list for sustainable innovation going forward, what would be top on that list, number one priority? And Philipp, we can start with you.
To ask a politician for one sentence is quite bold but optimistic. But I guess so. I think we should give them more freedom to unleash the potential which is there without any doubt. But we need creativity and dynamism, and we should make it possible and happen.
Okay, Sabine.
Lead and do it.
Lead and do it. That makes me think of Mark Zuckerberg, move fast and break things.
No, I didn't want to.
I know you didn't say that.
Quote him, but I think you asked us to be short. I tried.
Absolutely. And Katharina?
Always learn and discover new things.
Okay, and Dominic, last but not least?
Be disruptive and fearless, and use technology to imagine tomorrow, not to capture today.
Thank you. That's a great note to close on. Thank you to all of our guests for this really vibrant, dynamic discussion. I hope we've learned something here about how innovation can become more sustainable and resilient for the future. So we hope that you've enjoyed this discussion as well. You can give us your feedback by commenting, of course, on social media using our hashtags TDI21 and Choicing the Now. And we look forward to seeing you for our further sessions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.